Good morning, everybody, and welcome into HawgHoops Live. I am your host, Curtis Wilkerson. You can find me over at HawgSports.com with Trey Biddy, Danny West, and Andrew Ellis. The good news, Arkansas is 1-0 on the season after knocking off North Dakota State 76-58 last night in Bud Walton Arena. The not-so-good news, Nick Smith Jr. is out indefinitely with a banged-up knee. We're going to break down all of that. We're going to look ahead at Friday's matchup with Fordham, take a look around the SEC, talk a little bit of recruiting, and of course we'll get to your questions, your comments, so be sure that you throw those in the chat. All that and more coming your way today on HawgHoops Live. It should be a fun show. Let's get started. All right, everybody, a quick reminder on all the ways you can watch or listen. You know the drill by now. Same Facebook page when we go live here, the same podcast channel where you find Trey on HawgSports Live. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it, we're there. Different YouTube channels, so do me a favor, type in HawgHoops Live, go to YouTube page, subscribe for us. We would definitely appreciate that. That's where we upload all of these videos after the show if you want to go back and watch it then. The live reactions that we do at some of the different venues after the games and the weekends and things of that nature, you can find all those over there on the YouTube page, so be sure to check that out for us. All right, let's just jump right into it here. Let's start with probably the biggest news of yesterday, which was, quite honestly, finding out that Nick Smith Jr. was not playing. There had been a lot of rumors flying around the last couple of days as far as his availability was concerned. That smoke did lead to some fire there. The release, honestly, it was a little bit vague and maybe unclear, probably by design though. But it did say that, Nick was in right knee management and being held out for precautionary reasons. No timetable for a return. Sounds like Kawhi Leonard, though, right? Like the load management. Hopefully that's the case. And listen, I've heard a few things in regards to what's actually going on there, but I don't know anything for certain, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and speculate on that. I think that's foolish when people do that, and it's not fair to the kid or to the team. Muss, and this is not surprising at all, he didn't have much to add when we kind of pried him on it after the game during the press conference. He didn't really hint at the severity or the nature of it, when he might be expected back, and really anything we say in here is nothing more than a guess or hearsay. I just hope that the kid heals up and gets on the floor soon because he's a competitor, and Razorback fans are dying to see him play. What I will say about this is when you have a prospect of this caliber, though, you kind of enter just a different arena and a different set of circumstances. I think it's a delicate situation, really, for all parties to handle. Nick's a top 5 projected pick. So to me, it wouldn't be surprising. I think it would probably make sense to maybe be overly cautious, regardless of what the nature of his injury or ailment is, and just making sure that he's 100% before he takes the floor. Because you got a long-term future to consider there. So, how long that takes, I don't know. But I would imagine Arkansas and Nick and his camp, they're going to make sure that he's fully healthy, comfortable, ready to go before they clear him to put him back out there. How long that's going to be, we'll see. It is an unfortunate, situation that kind of added, I think, to, I don't know, what's a little bit of a weird season opener. You have an entirely flipped roster that's coming off a 30-point embarrassment against Texas. It finds out that it won't have, who's arguably its best player for the season opener. It's a decent amount of adversity before even tipping off, right? Considering that, I actually came away impressed and pleased by what I saw from Arkansas on Monday night. I really did. I feel like this team could probably hang its hat on the defensive end of the floor, early in the year, and I feel like they did that last night. Held North Dakota State to 33.9% from the floor, 5 of 21 from 3. They forced 14 turnovers, limited them to 58 points. That's something that'll win you a lot of ball games, and I get it. North Dakota State is not Texas, but that's a big step forward from where they were the previous weekend. I thought Arkansas was really swarming. They really used their length well. They made North Dakota State uncomfortable. And I thought they played with a lot more physicality than they did when they were down in Austin. And there's some kinks to work out still. Let North Dakota State's best player, Grant Nelson, get off a little bit. He had 17, had a big second half. Put him on the free throw line too much. 23 free throws for North Dakota State. But when all this individual talent becomes the sum of its parts, these guys can be elite defensively, I'm telling you. I think the main questions, given the circumstances, where would the offense come from, right? Nick's not available, so who's going to score? And I think that's a valid concern. I think it was, and I think it still is. We've been wondering who was going to be, the guy or the guys that provide the consistent pop behind him. And for now, at least, it's who's going to take the lead, and provide the scoring punch until he's back. And so, as a team, listen, there were some dry spells. It was a little bit stagnant, sloppy at times, but they showed that spurt ability from last year with a couple overwhelming runs late in the first half. It was a 13-5 run to give them some separation, a little breathing room going into the break. And then they had that run early in the second half that put the game away. Shot 49% from the field. That's efficient, and that's what happens when you put an emphasis on getting downhill and putting pressure on the rim. That was a key that I listed coming into the game. They were selective but efficient from three-point range. Look, give me 4 of 10 from 3 all season. And if Arkansas does that, I'll be sitting here in March eating an actual crow like I said I would on the last show. But that's good. They were selective. They emphasized their strengths, and they, quite frankly, had some open looks from 3, and they cashed them in. That's what you want to see from this group. So, I thought some individuals really stepped up and assumed, kind of some alpha lead roles as scorers, guys who aren't afraid to shoulder that load right now. The first guy, honestly, who immediately came to mind for me was Ricky Council. Because what I loved about him as an addition in the offseason was, even though he was a sixth man of the year, in fairness to him, in the AAC, he was pretty much a go-to option for Wichita State because, he's a guy who you can give the ball to, clear everyone out, and let him create. And Eric Musselman loves that kind of guy. We know that. I thought Ricky was great. He led the team with 22 points. He was 9 of 14 from the field. He had a 3, which you like to see from him because I think he can give you a little bit from the perimeter. But, man, it's kind of a weird comp, I think, because Ricky is way more athletic, but probably less crafty and maybe not as good of an outside shooter. But he's got some Mason Jones to his game. Just in terms of his size and his wiggle, that combination makes him a hard guy to keep in front. And when he gets you on his hip, man, he's going to get to the rim and finish. Had some acrobatic finishes. Had a really great dunk, crazy reverse dunk in traffic. Trevin Brazile was talking about after the game. He's like, I've never seen anybody do that. It's crazy. And it was. It was. So, kudos to him from that standpoint. I was really impressed seeing him as a pick and roll ball handler. We saw that just a little bit in that last game in Europe. When Nick was actually out in the second half of that game, they put the ball in Ricky's hands more and let him operate in that ball screen action. He looked pretty good. Musk said after the game, like, maybe this is something we look into in the next few weeks. We didn't see a ton of it in the exhibition season, but he got that opportunity last night. I thought he looked good. He set the tone early. I think he scored 6 of the first 8 points or so, but he got a steal, went down and finished in transition. He hit a turnaround jumper, got downhill and got to the rim again. Really gave Arkansas a jolt because you wondered if they were going to have some jitters. Maybe that happens. First game, you got a new team. It's a weird situation as everybody settles in. But I think he helped them have a little bit more juice than they did jitters coming out of the gate. He's probably not going to give you 20 points every night, but he comes with some firepower, and Arkansas is going to need that right now and when Nick is back. I think he could be a really good complementary piece there. Trevin Brazile, listen, everybody knows that Brazile is my man. Right, I was a little bit worried about him early, I'm not going to lie. He didn't start the game. He came in, he missed his first 4 shots. He looked a little, I don't like using the word soft, but maybe a little passive defensively and on the glass. But man, all he needed was that corner 3 late in the first half, and he followed it. It might have been the next possession, actually, with that pick and roll dunk. that sequence right there, I thought completely flipped the switch of the game for him and maybe the entire team. He was really good, especially in the second half. 21 points total. He hit 3 3-pointers, which I think is a beautiful sight for Arkansas fans and NBA scouts, right? Because that's a big part of why he's such an attractive potential prospect. 12 rebounds, which you love to see. He was a little pissed because he said he was supposed to get 15. That was his goal. Great, man. Go out and get 15 rebounds every night. I think Arkansas would take that. And, Grant Nelson gave him some problems at times defensively, but listen, Brazile was awesome last night. And maybe the craziest statement I've heard this season was Trevin after the game saying that, he said, well, I was a role player at Missouri and, I'm being asked at Arkansas to be one of the top guys or to be a key contributor. What? I understand, guys develop and improve and all that, and he's a better player now than he was his freshman year at Missouri. But Arkansas is a superior program here, which makes you really wonder what the hell Quanzo Martin and Missouri were thinking with this kid. Unreal, such a special talent, and I feel like he was not used appropriately there, but that worked in the favor of Arkansas because they've got him now, and he's a really special piece that they can do a lot of things with. A couple other guys who get a shout out here. Devo, well, he's been debated all morning on our message boards. Man, listen, he's a guy that I looked at and said, well, his role just changed. When we got the news that Nick was going to be out, to me, suddenly he needed to become a scoring combo guard. He needed to be on the ball as a primary handler more. And I don't know that those things necessarily fit his ideal strengths, but listen, this team has to find some scoring right now, and he went out and gave you 18 points and pitched in 6 boards. The issue, yeah, I know. He's the only returning guard. He had 5 turnovers. He had 0 assists. I get it, right? Not great there. Devo is a showman. He's a flashy player. Sometimes you wish he'd reel it in a little bit. Okay, he was trying to make some big plays there, and some of those wild, over-the-head, 60-foot lobs, you could probably do without those. I understand that. But I think, given what Arkansas needed from him, in this game, what they're going to need from him right now, they need points. They need some production, some pop there. He provided that last night. And that's why I came overall impressed with the way that he played. Yeah. If you're going to have the ball in your hands, you got to distribute better. You got to cut down on the turnovers. I think he had almost half of the teams. He'll be fine. Mekhi Mitchell, man, hey, he earned the start at center. Every time we see this guy, he's playing a little bit better and better. I think he's going to eventually completely lock down that center spot. I really do. And he profiles as a guy to me that I think could be a defensive anchor for Arkansas if he stays focused. And some of the people I chatted with within the program last night are starting to feel the same way about what he's capable of. The dude can play now. He's got SEC athleticism and size. He had 3 steals. Not bad for your starting center. Man, he sets really good. I love him in the pick and roll. He sets really good screens. I like the way that he sets them in good spots on the floor. He sets them at good angles. And the thing that impresses me the most about him in pick and roll is he's not like a blind roller. A lot of times guys will just set that pick, they turn, they roll straight to the basket. They just go. And there might not be a seam there. He finds the open space. I think he reads his ball handler well. Whether they're dragging the dribbler or they're turning the corner, he times it up well to where he can get in the open space and catch and make a move, or he can get straight to the rim and go up for the lob. I think he's got some high IQ as a pick and roll guy. His back to the basket game, he's got some polish now. Some good moves down there. He can finish over either shoulder. Still a work in progress, getting comfortable in the system. We've talked about it, the playbook, whatever. But man, if he really takes the next step forward from that standpoint and continues to be a focused player, I really think he could help Arkansas. I really do. It was really an interesting starting lineup, but without Nick, you start to wonder what the different combinations could look like. What they went with, I don't think I ever would have guessed this. I don't know if anybody did, but they went with Anthony Black, Devo Davis, Ricky Council, Mekhi Mitchell, and Kamani Johnson. That's an interesting lineup. And Arkansas wound up playing a little bit smaller most of the game once they got into the flow of it. But to come out of the gates, I thought that group did pretty well. Arkansas was up at the media timeout. They played with energy. They looked fine to me, that group. So you had that 5, and then Brazil and Jordan Walsh. And listen, Walsh, I thought he played well, but he fouled out too quick. He fouled out in 18 minutes, so a little overly aggressive there. But that starting 5 in Brazil and Walsh really rounded out what looked like your top 7 in the rotation right now. A few other guys got in there. Barry Dunning played. He played some small ball 4, got out on the wing a little bit. I think he played maybe 8 to 10 minutes, mostly in the second half. Joseph Pinion got in there. Darian Ford got in there for a stretch in the first half, which that was good to see. We didn't see much of him in the exhibition. So, they played 10 guys. Looked like probably a top 7 there. It was interesting. The 2 did not plays were Jalen Graham, who had been a starter for you in both exhibitions. So interesting, I think. We'll see what happens there. And then Mikel Mitchell, who, we haven't seen that much of him, quite honestly. But I'll be interested to see what they do with the lineup on Friday. Muss hinted that they might make another change. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Brazil get back in there, maybe replace Kamani in that lineup. Maybe Jordan Walsh get back in there. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they tinker with this thing. But some good combinations there. I like it. Hey, listen, Arkansas is 1-0. Moving on. You're just taking a look around the SEC, just real quick. I think it's worth pointing out that the league did go 11-1 on opening night. The only loss for an SEC team was Vanderbilt, and they played a pretty good game, pretty close game against Memphis. Not too many notable matchups. A lot of teams playing mid-majors like Arkansas did. A couple things that I did find interesting. Kentucky, they rolled past Howard. That's not interesting or surprising, but they did it without Oscar Tshiebwe, who I think will probably be back at some point pretty soon here. Another thing that stood out to me, Tennessee. They blew out Tennessee Tech, beat them by 30-some-odd points, but they attempted 44 three-pointers. I've looked at it twice. I might have to go back again and see if I'm crazy, but 44 three-pointers. They made 14 of them. That's wild, man. A couple interesting, non-SEC notes. Oklahoma, who Arkansas plays in Tulsa in December, they lost to Sam Houston State by 1. I think it was 52-51, real low-scoring game. I didn't necessarily see that coming. Looking at the Maui field, that's creeping up on us pretty quick there. Pretty solid opening night for that crew, right? Arkansas won. Creighton, Arizona, San Diego State, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, Ohio State, they all won their games. Nobody really challenged. Louisville, who Arkansas opens up with in Maui, they don't play until Wednesday night. They've struggled some in their exhibitions. They lost to a D2 in their first one. They played another D2 in their second one. I think they squeaked that one out, but it was close. It was a dogfight in the second half. So we'll see if Kenny Payne can get those guys rolling before they head out to Hawaii. Fordham's up next, though, for Arkansas. The Rams out of the Atlantic 10. They're picked to finish 11th of 15 teams. That's a pretty good league, though. A really solid mid-major league. They were 16-16 last year, have a new head coach. Fordham did play last night. They beat Dartmouth at home, 88-74. I mean, there were a few things that stood out about that. I want to go back and watch more than just the highlights if I get the chance to. One thing, they were actually a worse three-point shooting team than Arkansas last season, but they were 40%, just like the Hogs in their opener. Arkansas was 4 of 10. Fordham was 8 of 20 from 3, so maybe they made some improvements there. They did shoot 57.4% from the field, which that's impressive against anyone, including, an Ivy League school. You take that. There are a couple names there I think to be familiar with ahead of this one on Friday. Darius Quisenberry. Really, really talented guard. This kid's a bucket. 6'2" senior, preseason, all A-10 player. He's averaged at least 14 points in all 4 of his seasons as a college player. He's an older guy, shooter, scorer. He had 20 points last night on 18 shots. So he's really the go-to guy. That's one thing Musselman mentioned about the defense last night. He was really pleased with the way that they played overall. But they take a lot of pride in shutting down or limiting the opponent's best player. And they didn't necessarily do that against North Dakota State's Grant Nelson. That's a 6'11 forward, versatile guy. He's good. He's really good, actually. I think he's got some pro potential. That's one of those dudes that, you start to look at this now, right? But you watch the teams that Arkansas plays, and you're like, oh, man, if this guy hits the portal, I'd be interested. I mean, that's what we did with Brazil last year, right? I remember everybody saying that. We would have threads started on our message board about him all the time. I think Brazil's going to hit the transfer portal. If he does, Hope Muss picks him up. Well, he did. If Grant Nelson hits the transfer portal, I hope Muss picks him up. I like that kid. He's a good player. But back to my point, now you've got a guard who kind of leads the charge for Fordham, so it's going to be interesting to see what Arkansas does there. How do you match up with him right away? Do you go with the experienced guy in Devo? I mean, hey, he's tweeting out there he's one of the best defenders in the country, so that would kind of, be his first opportunity to really prove it. So you go with the experience there. Do you go with Anthony Black? He's a true freshman, but we know that he's a really good defender. You put his 6'8" body with that length and wingspan that he has on a 6'2" guard and maybe disrupt him, getting his vision lanes a little bit. Might see both. Wouldn't necessarily surprise me at all. Well, Kiesenberry is a good player. They've got another guy, Georgia Tech transfer forward Khalid Moore. He's 6'7", 210. He was a nice pickup for them in the offseason. Was kind of a role guy for Georgia Tech. He played while he was over there, but obviously he's stepping into a bigger role with Fordham. He had a good debut, 18 points, 7 boards. He was 8 of 11 from the floor. So, listen, this is a game I think with or without Nick Smith that Arkansas should be able to win comfortably. I think Fordham's, they appear to be, just based on what I've seen, more athletic, but probably not quite as efficient or far along in their system as North Dakota State is. I mean, you're talking about, a coach at North Dakota State that's in his 9th year into the system. He's got that thing established. He's really got it rolling. That's what made them such a challenge, I thought. Fordham is probably more talented, and they have better athletes, but this is a brand new coach, new team, new system that he's implementing. So they might have some of that sloppiness, maybe that we've seen from Arkansas early on as they're trying to get all the pieces fit into place. But I think I'd probably take Arkansas here in the 20-point-ish range. I think they'll win this one comfortably. All right. Let's talk a little bit of recruiting. I guess we'll start with the bad news, right? I mean, Ron Holland committed to Texas. That's too bad. It's unfortunate because the staff did prioritize him hard. They did a great job recruiting him. It's been trending towards the Longhorns for a bit. We kind of hinted that at the last show, although we did say Arkansas was still alive, and they were, and they felt that way, I think, probably until at least that they had a puncher's chance, maybe until the night before Holland made his announcement. I kind of hoped that Muss might be able to pull that late close in there like he did with Anthony Black last year. But at the end of the day, Holland opted to stay home. Not the end of the world. You can't get them all. You can try. But I think it is interesting. Arkansas really planted that flag in the state of Texas last year when they went out and got Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, a couple 5-stars out of that state, kind of establishing a pipeline. Chris Beard, to his credit, he threw a little bit of a counterpunch there, and so he got his guy to stay at home this year. I think we have a nice rivalry forming here on the recruiting trail between these guys. It's going to be fun to watch because there's some 2024 prospects that both of those schools are going to be on heavily. I think about a guy like Dink Pate, Trey Johnson, some highly coveted guys that Arkansas is prioritizing. Chris Beard's probably going to want to keep him at home, so it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of ebbs and flows over the course of the next few years here, because I do think the Lone Star State could be a really good pipeline for Arkansas. There's so much talent there, and there's a lot of talent within the state of Arkansas too, don't get me wrong. That's a big reason for the success that Musselman's had since he's been here. And the future classes project well too. But basketball is more of a national recruiting sport, although if you can get a pipeline going regionally, that helps you quite a bit. Texas, if you look around the country and think about some of the hotbeds, it's really blowing up. The Dallas-Fort Worth area, so much talent down there. Houston, so much talent down there. So there's a lot of good basketball to be played down there. Arkansas is going to be trying to pluck some guys from that state still. We'll see what kind of success they have moving forward. I think they'll probably be just fine. Early signing period starts on Wednesday. As I understand it, Leighton Blocker's still planning to sign early. I haven't heard anything concrete on the day or the details yet. We'll see what comes of that. But that's your lone commitment in the 2023 class. Composite 5-star. He was actually down in, I believe that event was held in Texas, maybe at Duncanville over the weekend with Sunrise Christian. They played Duncanville. Had some good competition down there. It sounds like Leighton played really well on the defensive end of the floor. I said it last time, but I'm excited about him. He's such an explosive player. He might be the best on-ball defender, perimeter defender in his class. He's just kind of got some Arkansas about him. Obviously, he's a home state guy, but he plays so hard. He's kind of got that energy, that tough-minded mentality. He'll die for the loose balls, get after it. He's a vocal guy, and he's explosive. He's not the biggest guy in the world, maybe 6'2", but he can get up and finish above the rim. So I think Arkansas fans are really going to like him. And you still got decisions coming on the top 2 remaining targets for the class, right? On November 15th. That would be 6'10" forward Bay Fall and fellow 6'10" forward Hassan Diop. As things stand today, I still do like where Arkansas is at with these two. Falls down to Arkansas, Auburn, Seton Hall, and Rutgers. Diop is down to Arkansas, Seton Hall, and Colorado. I like where the Hogs are at with those guys. What do we want to call them if they commit? I feel like we could have fun with this. The Colorado Cousins, the Denver Duo. I don't know. We got to have something, right? I mean, think about it. All right. Let's jump into some questions and comments. People probably want to chime in here. We'll grab a couple from our Razor's Edge message board, and then we'll jump over into the chat and wrap it up here. Let's see. Oklahoma Hog asks if Trevin Brazile will lead the team in three-point shooting this year. Well, I guess depending on how long Nick is out, he's got as good of a chance as anyone. It was really good to see him knock down 3 3-pointers last night. And it's interesting because he said in Europe that he's such a rim-minded or rim-focused player. And he should be. I mean, he's 6'11", and probably got a 40-inch vertical. But that, kind of his challenge as a three-point shooter was just to get more comfortable in taking them. Well, he did that on Monday, and I think the good thing about it was he wasn't settling, and he had a balance there. And I think that's what's going to be the key moving forward. I don't know if we can count on 3 out of him every night. I mean, if you can, holy cow. This guy's going to wind up pushing lottery status. But no, I do think that he's a guy that is going to be selective in terms of taking quality shots out there, catch and shoots from the corner when he kind of fades out from that dunker spot, maybe some trail threes in transition. Those are going to be some pretty good looks for him. So I do think he can give you a little bit of volume. I think he might be a pretty high percentage guy because he seems like one that's going to take quality shots. So you might be onto something there. Hog Nation 9 asks for any insight into why Trevin Brazile didn't start, and if I remember when Nick Smith Jr. got hurt at Texas, or if it's the same injury. Okay, with Brazile, man, I mean, I know that Texas game wasn't televised, but I was there. He really, really struggled. I mean, he looked shook out there, to be honest with you. Lacked physicality, almost seemed a little bit overwhelmed at times, and there were stretches where he was out there for a long period, maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and just didn't record a stat. Not a rebound, not a shot attempt, nothing. He was just kind of out there. So really struggled. I imagine it was probably a wake-up call for him. Like, hey, dude, you're one of our better players. We need you to produce, though. And if you're not, somebody else is going to get the shot. Maybe he needed a little bit of tough love. I like the way he responded. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in there on Friday. We'll see. But he proved he can produce off the bench too. So like what you have there in him. The other question on Nick. I don't really recall him getting hurt or looking like he tweaked anything in that Texas game. I mean, I wasn't watching for it, but I don't remember seeing anything there. He did sit the last 12 minutes or so. I mean, I chalk that up to why risk anything with your top guys, any of them, when you're kind of getting crushed in an exhibition game like that. It was out of hand at that point. And like I said earlier, we kind of pried Muss for more details last night on when it happened or if it was a lingering deal, a new injury, whatever. He wasn't really interested in offering up a lot more detail there. Honestly, I don't blame him though. For one, I mean that's up to him and the kid and his family. Secondly, it's probably only potentially harmful to put labels and expectations on that, and maybe I think what people are failing to consider here is that when it was released, it sounded like load management, right? And maybe that it was a tweak or, whatever, or a minor deal that they're monitoring out of precaution. And so if it is a day-by-day or game-by-game situation, then you don't really know, and it is what it is. So I think it's one thing that people need to consider. I know a bunch of rumors are out there. You'd think the poor guy had his leg amputated. But that's what happens. Things start swirling. Things start spiraling out of control. But I do think it could be potentially harmful to put expectations on a return timetable if you aren't really sure. Why do that? Why put that pressure on yourself or the player? Everybody heals up differently. It's not like it's as easy as just looking up an injury on Wikipedia and saying, oh, you've got this. You'll be back in 2 weeks or whatever. So I think that has to be considered too. And Arky asked who will lead the team in SportsCenter Top 10 this year. Trevin Brazil. The dude is a highlight waiting to happen. He gets up there. And some of those lobs he's going to catch, some of these block shots that he's probably going to get, I think he's going to be a frequently featured guy on SportsCenter. Big Baby Hog asks, who has the better finger roll, Ricky Council or George Gervin? I love that. The thing about Council is he gets up so high, so athletic and explosive. He gets up so high that his arm is almost extended straight out at the rim on those little finger rolls. It's like, dude, just dunk it. Just put it in. He had one that rolled out on him. But, yeah, he's smooth, man. He's smooth. We'll do one more from the board, and then we'll move on here. Oh, I love this from West Hog 21. He says, let's play a hypothetical. If Nick Smith, for whatever reason, never played a minute for Arkansas this season, what is the ceiling for this team? First of all, let me be clear. I have no reason to believe that Nick Smith is out for the season. I think he's going to be back out there at some point. When? I don't know. We'll see. But in this hypothetical situation, if you don't have him, how good could this team be? My answer probably changed from what it would have been this time yesterday. Now that we've seen Arkansas kind of, operate without him. And like I said earlier, I was pretty impressed with what I saw from Arkansas overall. I mean, they're not a finished product. It wasn't like an A+ game or anything like that, but they did what they had to do, and I think there's room for growth there. I think this could still be a tournament team if they didn't have him. I do. They'd be limited at times offensively, especially when you start playing better competition. I think that's real. But I think you're probably looking at more in that 7 to 10 seed type of range. If that were to be, the case, especially, but, at the same time, I do think that this group has elite defensive potential. And when I say elite, I mean top 5 in the country. I think they could be that good on the defensive end of the floor. And if that comes to fruition and they really buy into it and that's how they're going to win games, then maybe that ceiling could be a little bit higher. So, yeah, I think they could still be a tournament team and a team that could win a game, maybe 2 there. We've seen Arkansas take limited teams into the last 2 NCAA tournaments and make it to the Elite 8. So you wouldn't rule anything out. I don't know that I would go into it expecting that necessarily with this group, but they would also, in this hypothetical, have 30 more games to figure it out and convince me. So, But then what I like about this question is that West Hog kind of doubled down after that and said, essentially, if and when Nick does return, right, how many games do you think it will take this team to really come together and gel to be playing their best basketball? Well, I think that's probably the real interesting thing that we have to consider here. And this is why this situation kind of stinks. I mean, aside from, a young man not being healthy enough to compete, right now. But there's something to be said for, this team that's still got 10 new faces out there, figuring it out early on, finding ways to win, establishing an identity just in time to add a guy who's going to be a major piece of the operation. It's not like you're adding, a fringe starter or a role player. Nick's the dude if he's out there, right? And so that changes everything you're trying to do because you're going to run it through him. That's just the way it is and the way it should be while he's out there. So it's almost like hitting a reset button at that point to a degree. Don't get me wrong. Listen, you add Nick Smith whenever you can. Hopefully Friday. Fingers crossed, whatever. But I do think that's something to keep an eye on with how long it would take Arkansas to kind of redevelop that part of the chemistry and reform their identity, because it does. I think it very clearly, no Nick versus having Nick changes the identity of Arkansas basketball and the type of team that they are. And that's not necessarily from a good or bad team standpoint so much as just what your identity is, what your strengths are, and what you're capable of doing out there and what you lean on. And there's also a trickle down on how it would impact everybody else's role. So I think that'll be one of the most fascinating things to watch with this team once Nick gets back out there. I really do. Okay, let's hop over to the chat and see what we have here. Let me scroll to the top. Here we go. Jonathan Parker says, do you think Ford and Dunning will get more time? I think the opportunity is there right now in the backcourt, right? If you're a man down, and Musk said it last night, cliche, whatever, but next man up, right? Next man up. So Dunning got some time. I think, like I said earlier, he got about 10 minutes of time. Played some small ball 4. And I think you could see a little bit of that out of him. With Ford, I don't know. He wasn't really in there long enough for me to get a good judgment. But I do think it's telling that he got an opportunity, because we didn't see a lot of him, in these exhibition games, until maybe later on, once things were decided and everything like that. So maybe he's coming on a little bit. It'll be interesting to see, because I do think if you have, and Arkansas's got several wings, right? But if you have a guard, a 1 or a 2 who's out, it's a little thin there. Kind of is. So maybe he's a guy that could fill that void. We'll see how he progresses if he gets more opportunities here. Zachary Beeler, my guy. This looked good last night, Curtis. Very excited for the season for sure. Yeah, they did look good. I was a little antsy about it going into that, last night. I didn't think Arkansas was going to lose or anything like that, but I did think it could be a struggle. I thought it might be one of those situations like the opener last year where it's just too close for comfort, halfway through the second half or whatever, and then Arkansas would kind of pull away and win by double digits. But they really put the game away in that first segment of the second half, which, we spent a lot of time talking about the guys who stepped up and provided offense, but Devo and Trevin and Ricky Council combined to score the first 24 points of the second half for Arkansas. It was pretty impressive. I want to say it was well over maybe 10 minutes into the half, maybe even more than that, when Mekhi Mitchell made a jump hook. And that was the first point scored by a Razorback outside of those 3 guys. 24 straight points by those 3. Pretty cool. Steve Miller says, Devo, Brazil, and Council is a nucleus they can build around. Anthony Black had some bad luck with shots not falling. Otherwise, he's an impressive defender. Mitchell had some fine post play. Yeah. I didn't talk much about Anthony Black. I agree. Man, it was really good to see him early on in the game. He really turned the corner on a screen and got downhill and finished. And he went up with authority. And he was a layup, but he finished strong. He's a powerful finish. But then he was just 1 of 7 for the game. I like the aggression that he was attacking the rim with, though. Even though those were kind of rolling off, I agree. Maybe a little bit of tough luck. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. He's still a true freshman, just in terms of the physicality. But once that comes, I do think he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to finish good in there and just get a little bit more comfortable. His role might have been impacted a little bit too without Nick out there. So he had to make an adjustment as well. I think he was a 3-2 assist to turnover. that's fine for your debut, but I do think he's going to be a higher assist guy as we kind of get on into the season. And agreed on Mitchell. Makai looked good. Tommy Bowen says, the announcers made mention of a visible limp from Nick, but he sure was vocal on the sideline and was cheering on the other guys. Great team player. I mean, obviously I was at the game, so I didn't hear what was said there. Yeah, most of the times I looked down there, he was just kind of standing around before the game, in pregame. He was out there around the team. I didn't really pay attention to him walking too much, but I did see him, up cheering, clapping, everything on the sideline. That's good to see. The kid wants to be out there, man. He's a competitor. He wants to be out there. Kevin Gill says, Musselman always plays every upperclassman on game one the past 3 seasons. It was interesting that he didn't play Graham, and especially Graham, but then also Makel Mitchell. But yeah, he usually, leans on, the veterans, guys who've kind of been there and proven that, whether it's been on his teams or at a different college. I would agree. He typically does. But you've also got a hell of a freshman class that you can lean on a little bit more too. So maybe that impacts it some. Jonathan Parker said Devo had some crazy passes. Yeah, some of those were wild. I'm not going to lie. Some of them were a little wild. That's Devo for you. Grayson Reeser says, loved our D and Link last night. Definitely think this team can hang their hat on that and find success with it. Agreed. I think we're on the same page there. It could be a really fun group to watch defensively. Can kind of do it all. I mean, they can get out there and disrupt in the passing lanes. They can switch. I think they can defend in the post, but they have been maybe a little frustrating and just kind of settling for playing behind the post at times. And listen, when you get a one-on-one on the block against any established college forward, especially once you get an SEC play, but the Nelson kid was good for North Dakota State, that's advantage offense most of the time. And so I think they could work a little bit harder in maybe a 3-quarter denial or even front, and must mention, hey, we want to front that post, doing that because they're going to be a hard team to lob over the top of, because of the length you have in front and then the guys who can get over and recover and help you on the backside. So that's definitely something to work on for them. John Sullivan says, do you know the deal on Graham last night? Yeah, I was surprised to not see him out there, honestly. Didn't play well at all at Texas. He got a couple short stints and maybe looked a little bit overmatched, or I don't know, just maybe unfocused out there. And so he didn't play a ton. But, we did ask Muss after the game if he was healthy or if it was a coach's decision. He just kind of said, no, he's healthy, coach's decision. So maybe that's just where he's at on the depth chart right now, or, a wake-up call. I think he's going to get a chance, though. I really believe that. I think he'll be back in there at some point, especially if you continue to need to find guys who can score, because he's somebody that can do that for you. Defense and rebounding, that might be a question mark for him, but scoring, especially when he gets inside and he can face up and use that spin dribble, he can provide some points for Arkansas for sure. Steve Miller says this roster is deeper than any team Muss has had at Arkansas. Some combination of the older players will be played until he finds ones he likes. By the time conference play starts, Walsh, Black, and hopefully Smith will turn a corner. Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time for everybody to adjust, but that's anywhere in the country. I think Duke has 5 or 6 freshmen or whatever. It's going to take time for those young guys to adjust too. They can be really good right now, but they'll hit their peak and really get into their stride once we get several weeks into the season. Lost my place here. Oh, Bradley Fireball Burnett says, does McAdoo get the start by the weekend? I hope so. He looked good out there. No knock on Malik Chavis, but man, McAdoo, you had a pass breakup, an interception, you blocked a punt. That doesn't earn you a start. I don't know what does. Matthew Turner says, do you expect more production from Kamani Johnson? Yeah. 0.0 rebounds. I expect more production from that out of a starter. Listen, he's in there to be physical, provide some toughness and play with an edge. And I thought he did that. He was active defensively. He's not going to be a big scoring guy. I think we know that, although he does have a knack for getting to the free throw line. But rebounding is where he's going to make his money and earn his playing time. Jonathan Parker says, what do you think of the flop rule? I don't know. I could be talked in anything there. I get annoyed when it's obvious and egregious. But at the same time, I do feel like that's going to run into some situations where it's just a judgment call by an official. And if it's not obvious, and sometimes it is, but if you make that judgment call and it's the wrong call, that can be the difference in the outcome of a game. I mean, it's a free throw. For the other team, points matter. So I don't know. And I need to go back and watch that replay, because it happened so quick that by the time I realized that Kamani had been hit with that flop call, I had already erased out of my mind what had just happened. I need to go back and look at that. I don't know if it was a good call, bad call, or whatever. I didn't seem like Muss was real happy about it. But it's going to be really interesting to see how much that's called and utilized this season just across college basketball. Jalen Williams is probably happy he's in the league now, because he took a lot of those and he was a great charge taker, but there was some gamesmanship to that. So he probably would have been hit with a few of them. Maybe they put that rule in because of him. I don't know. Beeler says the Denver duo for sure. I like that. Yeah, I like that. And then Zach Van says, what do you make of Graham on the bench? He looked good sitting over there in his shooting shirt. I think I like him coming off of the bench. I like him starting the game on the bench, but I'd like him to get in. I think we said that on the last show. I do think he could be a guy maybe in a six-man role, or just maybe one of your first bigs off of the bench if you have Brazil and Mackay starting. Who can just kind of come in and provide some offense for that second unit, because that's one thing that we'll see, as I think Arkansas has to get into their rotation a little bit more over the course of the seasons. When they start making that first round of subs and guys start coming out and getting a blow, where does the offense come from? Maybe Graham could be a guy that they come there and facilitate some things through and run some things through, because he can score it down there on the block. He's also a good passer. But we'll see. We'll see if he gets out there on Friday. Michelle Wilkerson, wifey, says it was a good call, I thought. At least with the new rule, his head went back. Okay. I would not put it past Kamani Johnson to flop. So, all right. I think that's going to wrap us up. Looks like we made our way through the chat. Good show today. This was fun. I really appreciate everybody participating, chiming in, as always. That's what makes the show fun for me. Like I said earlier, be on the lookout for a live reaction over on our YouTube page after that game on Friday. It'll probably be pretty late Friday night, but if you're driving up to Fayetteville to catch that football game on Saturday morning, it'll give you something to listen to and take a look at. So be on the lookout for that. And, got this Fordham game coming up on Friday, South Dakota State. Next week, we'll have a show again after that. And it's off to Maui, baby. So it's about to get real for the Razorbacks. Basketball season's back. Positive vibes. It's been Curtis Wilkerson with HawgSports. We'll catch you guys next time.